I think the number one thing I want to say here, and what I mean is, try not to feel too low on the comments and the things that come at you on social media and online, because it's really just people who care and are trying to be constructive. And yeah, just try your best to listen, and try your best to also stay in tune with your vision and see it through.
Hey everybody, Tanner here with WAGMI Ventures. On today's episode, we have Joseph Cooper, founder at Earn Alliance. For anyone who's new, this is the WAGMI Ventures podcast, where we do snapshots with interesting founders from across Web3. Check out wagmiventures.io to learn more about the syndicate behind the podcast. But for now, let's get into it with Coop from Earn Alliance. All right. Hey, everybody. I'm here today with Joseph Cooper, who goes by Coop. He's the founder at Earn Alliance. Coop, how's it going today?
Doing good. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing good, man. I'm excited to chat. So why don't you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your journey to launching Earn Alliance?
Sure. So yeah, I have been an engineer since I was 9 years old. So it all started with modding games, the StarCraft maps to be precise. Did a little bit of scripting, and then evolved into making bots that would play StarCraft for me, and then eventually doing private servers and MMORPG mods in high school. And really just started off as just exploring online and convincing my mom to let me meet strangers in IRC and learn how to code. So it's been just a pretty humble journey in that sense. But where it all really began is when we created the MMO mods and started making money. I kind of became an entrepreneur at a young age, about 15, 16, had to start hiring people, and then, getting, really serious and building and making about 150K US a month. Before I went to uni and had that hard decision, do I go get a degree, or do I, continue to make game mods? But fortunately went to uni, and I say fortunately because I was like pretty introverted, didn't really know how to talk on a microphone or do anything, and got my social skills there. So pretty happy I did finish that and got my comp sci degree. But after uni, I stopped mods and started creating game companies. So relevant ones would be Hourblast Games, which was a mobile game company. You can imagine like Street Fighter on the iPad, right when the first App Store came out. So one of the first 3D mobile games you could play. So that was fun down in California. And then I moved over to Hong Kong because I met this awesome lady in LA who's from Hong Kong, and decided to join Junglee Games. So Junglee Games is the second largest online mobile casino. So you can play on mobile, you can play on web, but it's a real money casino in India. And we sold it to PokerStars about 2 years ago. And saw that from the beginning, where there's 15 of us, all the way to about 600. And it was a crazy journey. Spent a lot of time in India, coming as a Cali boy. So that was wild. And then I took a break from the game industry and sold a DevTools startup to Square. And just, I guess, quickly after that, don't want to get too in the details of the DevTools startup because it's all about Web3 and games. And Earn Alliance right now is that once Axie Infinity blew up and I started looking at the space, I just couldn't help to dive into it. So Earn Alliance was the birth of my, I guess, background in trading crypto, and then also just being in the game industry this entire time. So yeah, happy to dive into Earn Alliance and questions, but that's the gist of where I came from.
Yeah, super interesting. So maybe to set the stage, can you just give us a little context for maybe game industry broadly, but especially kind of Web3 game industry, and specifically maybe like what's gone right, what's gone wrong so far, and then situate for us what Earn Alliance is and what it's doing in that story. Yeah,
so let's start off with, I guess, the ugly. So what hasn't gone too right is that it's just early. I would say that the Web3 game industry hasn't attracted game designers and game developers and game, I guess, economists is really what I would be saying is missing in the space. And it's really hard to make a game that people come back to and play every day, just in terms of retention and that, addiction and love factor. But on top of that, if you're going to create a balanced like economy that's a closed economy or an open economy like in MMORPGs, but then you have a free economy, which is where blockchain, kind of adds to it. That's extremely difficult. And that's the challenge I think the industry is up against. So what hasn't been too well is that these economies that have been created have been quote unquote, Ponzi-nomics or inflationary tokens. And I think people just need to, put some more brain power, hire some more talent, and, a lot more, I guess, love into this early industry. It needs to happen. In terms of what's been going well is, watching Axie Infinity and seeing, about 35 billion US in transactions in 2021, just on the Axie NFTs alone. That's just mad. And that didn't come from gamers spending money on in-app purchases. That came from speculators, hedge funds, people who just wanted to trade and flip NFTs. And then, of course, some guilds, which is this new concept of, in my opinion, esports meets fintech. So there's a lot of interesting, good stuff happening. And in terms of Earn Alliance, the space was we started as a tool to help measure the performance of game NFTs and Axie Infinity with Earn Management. But we realized that it's just way too early to really build for this space. And when I say build, is in build tools that are truly useful. So we're helping build up this space by bringing gamers to discover games. So you can think of us as like a game directory where people could find up to 550 games now that we hand curated with our community. And once you discover those games, you might fall in love with them. And we focus on the content of what those games have to offer, not like the floor prices or the NFTs that are involved. So really just trying to focus on the core fun and content of what's out there today.
Love it. Yeah. So in doing a little reading, entertainment value came up as kind of a priority for Earn Alliance at this stage of things. And so I was curious, like, what does it look like to curate Web3 games for their entertainment value rather than their NFT price? And how does that look in practice? You mentioned kind of doing it collaboratively with your community, but curious if you could kind of expound on that a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. So today I would treat like the game directory is what we're calling it right now as the Netflix for Web3 games. So you can imagine this wall of these images that you can hover over. And when you hover over them, it would automatically play a 15-second curated video. No sound. It doesn't scare you like on Netflix. I don't know if that happens to you where your volume's turned up and it autoplays. But so no sound. It shows you a quick view of like what the game looks like. Where is it at? And then if you click on it, you'd see a little bit of information about the game, what chains, what type of game types is it multiplayer, MMO? Is it a zombie survival? So we really hand curated everything, really referencing Steam and how they curate games and bringing it over to Web3. And we started off with our internal community, our internal like guild. Actually, we originally started as a guild way back then. But then we expanded it and opened it where people can submit games that we haven't found yet. So if they found a game that isn't on our list, and they provide the images and the name and the descriptions and the correct information, we'll accept it and incentivize them with the token we'll be launching later this year.
Very cool. So I'm curious too, like what games in Web3 do you think get it right at this stage, where they're providing top entertainment value while also adopting some of the unique unlocks from Web3? Is there anyone that's doing it to the potential that you see could exist, or is it just so early that there wouldn't be any kind of representatives quite yet?
I would actually say it's too early to have a representative quite yet, as much as I want to bet on, some things that look cool out there. But right now, everything's very, very closed, like behind doors. You can kind of see a few screenshots. But the problem is it takes years to make great games. And it actually isn't like a straight path that you could think about just copying and pasting and reskinning, an idea. But like I was mentioning, the challenge of opening up your game economy to be in a free market is something that's just like, how the heck do you balance that? There's no reset button. So yeah, I think it's a little too early to point out anything that's sticking out for me.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting in and of itself. So let's take a step back. Maybe what have been some of the earliest challenges at Earn Alliance, and how have you and your team solved for those challenges?
Yeah, so the earliest challenges was we were trying to build tools for the game industry, the Web3 game industry. So we wanted to build all these asset management, like let's just say like a platform that would analyze your gamers. So how are they using your asset? Are they using it at the best of its ability? And when I say asset, I'm talking about NFTs. And then how are your assets actually performing? Like, are they used by some of the top players in the leaderboard, or are they currently being sold in the market? So you can imagine just a lot of analytics and information to help you understand your portfolio and how it's farming in Axie Infinity and other games, and how your asset stands within the economy. So as we were trying to expand to more games, we just realized that everybody was very difficult to speak to, like and partner with. The data wasn't always open. Some people were quite private about where their contracts were because of security purposes. So it was really hard to kind of like figure out how we're going to move forward and expand. And we didn't want to couple ourselves to just one game, especially after, the Axie Infinity hack. So that's why we shifted over to creating a community that could just help us. And also we can help the community find the next games that we would want to be working with. And we're not 100% sure that we would go back into asset managements and tools. We do know that we want to make it easy to find and buy and sell NFTs in the long run. So we do talk about a concept called the GG Exchange that we're definitely going to explore later this year. But right now it's really just about discovering what's out there.
Very cool. So similarly, I feel like early stage, there's challenges and then there's also surprises, right? So I'm curious what stood out as most surprising in your work building Earn Alliance thus far.
I'll just say the amount of hackers out there. Like building a Web3 company was like a whole different world. Like, so when it came to private servers in my early life, like that was reverse engineering and kind of like figuring out how to get around APIs and doing all that stuff. And that was as far as I went. So I have a good idea on what people do, but never went like super malicious. And going straight in like a brand new company, doing a press release about our seed round, and like boom, like just getting hit in 3 different angles within 2 to 3 weeks. So fortunately we have some really great people on the team who come from like very high security backgrounds and have been in crypto for a while. So nothing massive, like we haven't had any money loss or like any massive damage yet. But I was just very surprised at like who hit our front door and who successfully got in to like take over our Discord server, for example. So yeah, it's very, very interesting to see that happen so early.
Yeah, that's wild. So you just mentioned the seed round, where I did have a question where, it was a $4.75 million seed round in December, I think was the announcement. And yep. I think many would find it impressive just because this was in 2022, after the FTX news occurred and kind of further chilled out an already chilly investment space, right?
Yep.
So maybe just talk a little bit about that investment process and how you thought about finding the right partners, what it was like during the thick of this bear market.
Well, I will be honest, it's extremely difficult. I'll go through all of it. So I'm so grateful that we pulled it through. So how it all started was, I would say in April last year is actually when we had our first deck and we went out and did our first like tour, and the tour was 100% digital and mostly going through my network of networks. And I come from the game industry, but mostly where I started raising as like a CEO was more in the SaaS business. So it was a platform play for making it easy to ship code into the cloud. So actually most of the investors that I knew in VCs were not relevant for this one. So I kind of had to start from scratch. So I started with just like talking to friends and founders that were in the space. I would say 10 to 15 calls with good friends, and they gave me recommendations, and those recommendations came to recommendations. It just kind of popped. So I literally tracked about 107 VCs. It's shy 110, but it was literally over 100 and just over that I spoke to. And we were able to hit our anchor in May with Fabric Ventures in Europe. But the problem was we needed to hit a minimum amount of money in order to close the round in full. And Fabric would want to see that in order to come all the way through. So in order to get the remaining amount, which we had, angels and some mentors of mine and a couple smaller VCs in Asia behind us, we then landed Animoca and then blockchain co-investors. And this was all slowed because of the Luna hack. It was really slow at the beginning due to Axie Infinity's hack, and then the Luna happened. And fortunately, we were able to show traction and a compelling story to also get Coin Fund near the tail end in September. So everything was closed and signed by October and transferred in November. So fortunately, it closed a few weeks before the FTX happened.
Nice. That's really, really interesting to hear, especially the timeline too, because it wasn't just FTX, right? There was so much that happened in 2022. So that's really awesome hearing how you guys navigated that turbulence. So maybe taking a step back, what does Earn Alliance understand about Web3 gaming in 2023 that others may not perceive or even recognize as important, right?
Yeah, I think what would be important? So I would say in terms of recognizing something that I think people are missing is that we're not going to jump straight to Web3 games. And it's actually this thing that happens online a lot that I see is like, oh, is this Web 2.1 or 2.5 or 3? And it's kind of funny now that I'm saying the same thing. But what I actually mean by that is we have this world where Web3 speculators is what actually, for me and the team, we believe is what makes Web3 games very interesting, is where you have this free economy that people can transact on through these NFTs or these tokens. And those fees could essentially, be profits for the game developers. And before, game developers really relied on ads or in-app purchases if they're doing, free to play. And then there's, of course, now battle passes, all these other interesting, ways to monetize. So I think what we're seeing right now is that you're either going to have a free to play game that is going to attract a normal user who has nothing to do with wallets, has no idea about crypto, and they're going to fall in love with that game. And eventually they're going to, bring them over to this new world, which is, hey, do you know that you could potentially bring your NFT and sell it on a marketplace? Or that you can now participate in this highly incentivized esports campaign or competition because we have a lot of money that we made through the marketplace that we're reinvesting as tokens for esports rewards. So there's a lot of interesting plays that people can kind of start bringing the traditional Web 2 audience over to Web 3. But I still believe it requires starting with Web 3. It requires bootstrapping this free economy. And I think a lot of people are actually skipping that step and saying that we should just create traditional Web 2 free-to-play games and then introduce like a wallet on top of that. But I think somehow you have to do both. And I think that's what we're realizing talking to people in the space, and more that we go down into tokenomics and papers, the more we're starting to think that that's the right path.
Yeah, super interesting. So kind of starting to wrap up here, maybe three last questions. First, I think I'm curious, what aspects of the work you're doing do you get most personally excited about or passionate about? Where, I know you've got some roots, for example, just in doing some reading online. I know you've got some roots in like the late 90s online IRC communities, and it seems like you see some parallels today between some of the communities in Web3 and potentially some of the communities back then, as well as some of maybe like the fragmentation or complexity of those times, maybe some parallels there too. So I could be totally wrong, but I'm just curious, as you are in this space yourself, what are you most excited about?
I love how I found my passion through IRC and learning how to hack things together online with strangers. Um, it's just it's just something like I'm so happy to have found my passion and like spend my time doing what I love to doing, which is engineering, and then that evolved into growing companies and working with people and helping them either find their passions or just enjoy spending their time, the best way that they can spend it. And that's what I started seeing in Web3. Like the wake of Axie Infinity's fall was actually the birth of, I would say, thousands of passions. I want to say tens of thousands, but I believe it's in the thousands, where people who were part of these communities, these guilds, they were asked to manage social media accounts or asked to create banners around these events that were happening within their community, or asked to manage their community. And after the fall, they were hired or were able to find and utilize their skill to go do something else. I mean, some were even became artists or engineers and all these other great things. So I like being a part of like creating communities, and that's why I really came to start Earn Alliance, and that's why we call it Earn Alliance, to ally with everyone, within the ecosystem. And yeah, I guess like where I'm spending a lot of my time and where a lot of my interests are right now is unfortunately not coding anymore. I'm just a blocker for being too distracted and doing other things around the business, as much as I would love to contribute. But it's more around looking at the possibilities and the tokenomics that haven't been explored, because I have dabbled in game design and have designed a few games myself, and the potential of free open economies and starting to write tokenomics and light papers and speak to other game designers and doing Twitter spaces and kind of building in the open and sharing the goods and the bads and the uglies that are happening with the hacks and these ideas that were coming up. I just like the rawness of it all. So I'm really enjoying interacting with people in that sense.
Super interesting. Yeah. Okay. So what would be your most generalizable advice for founders building in the Web3 space, whether it's gaming particular or just this space particular?
Well, the first thing is, as I mentioned, Web3 comes with a security risk. I would say reputation is pretty important. And since you're building in the open, you're building these smart contracts that are open sourced, you're building these tokenomics and these plans that are public, and it does start with a community. It's a bit different than if you just go 100% with like a SaaS business or some of the other previous things that I've done. But in gaming, what happens is that I believe about 90% of the people that are happy who or have been burnt, like, just don't talk at all. They just, they either love your product and they just do their thing. And then, 10% might write some horrible review on the App Store or a smelly email that, hits your inbox. But today that 10% is amplified a lot more, because if you're going to build a Web3 company, you have a lot of money involved. If you're building protocols and you're, potentially have assets in custody, you're also incentivizing and hyping a community to potentially invest in your space. It's almost like going public before you're public, is what I've been kind of telling people. It's like you got these press releases before you even started, and when in reality you're actually just wanting to focus on building the product. But I think the number one thing I want to say here, and what I mean is, try not to feel too low on the comments and the things that come at you on social media and online, because it's really just people who care and are trying to be constructive. And yeah, just try your best to listen, and try your best to also stay in tune with your vision and see it through.
Love it. Coop, what is your team working on right now, and what's the best way for people to follow along on the journey?
Sure. So we're working on a thing called the Wall, which is the second form of this game directory. So imagine aggregating every Discord message, Discord stage, Discord event, Twitter space, and tweet that a game has in the industry. So we've taken all 2,000 games that we found, we're aggregating it in a single view, and you could filter it by, maybe you want to look at first-person shooter games on Polygon, or maybe RTS games on the BNB chain. So you can really like see what's happening at a glance, and it's live right now, the basic prototype, but it is in private alpha. So just come to the website, earnalliance.com, check out the countdown timer, and you'll see the opportunity to mint a free badge in order to get access to our site. I think the next one is coming in about 3 weeks. And otherwise, we have our blog, blog.earnalliance.com, and Twitter, which we're just updating pretty much every few days. So yeah, that's the best way to keep in touch.
Love it. Coop, thank you so much for the time. This was really, really interesting, and I'm excited for people to dive in more with Earn Alliance. So thank you again, and have a great start to your week here.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it.